Welcome back to today's session. We are going to deal with philosophy, educational aims and curriculum. Aims, goals, ends or objectives of education are the first essentials of any educational system. Without them, the whole educative process would be meaningless. Aims of education depend on the philosophy that prevails at the time of determining the aims of education. That is why they have been changing with the changing philosophy of life. Acharya J.B. Kripalani, the noted Gandhian philosopher, says, "No system of education can be properly appraised and appreciated unless it is studied in connection with the ideas and ideals which it represents." Aims of education during the ancient and medieval period. In ancient times, men needed training in the use of bows and arrows for their safety. Their needs were simple and a few. The process of production, consumption, distribution and exchange were quite simple. Thus, the educative needs were also simple and could be met by a process of education which was also very simple. Education in ancient India was mostly dominated by the religious considerations. Learning that was considered as a means of salvation or self-realization, emancipation, has been considered the highest end of life. The aims of Vedic and Brahmanical education is that emphasis upon knowledge and experience, sublimation of instincts, spirituality, growth of character and personality, fulfillment of duty and protection of culture. Education in Vedic period meant an illumination and an agency of improvement. Dr. A.S. Altekar has listed the aims of ancient or Vedic education. They are infusion of piety and religiousness, character formation, civic and social duties, their inculcation, promotion of social efficiency and happiness, development of personality and spread of culture. Attainment of nirvana was the ultimate aim of Buddhist system of education. It meant a life of sacrifice and dedication. Nirvana was nothing more than this spiritual realization. Aims of the medieval Muslim education was to spread the light of Islam, to infuse the distinct morality in education, to attain material prosperity and to spread the light of learning and to illuminate the minds of followers of Islam. Aims of education during modern times. The Charter Act of 1813 made English East India Company to accept the responsibility of educating the Indians. Aim of education under British rule mainly was to produce faithful servants. The aim of education in free India changed a lot. Four aims of education stated by the Secondary Education Commission 1952 to 1953 are: first one, development of democratic citizenship; second one, improvement of vocational efficiency; third, development of personality; fourth, development of qualities for leadership. Education Commission 1964 to 66 states the objectives of education. They are: first one, enhancing productivity; second one, strengthening social and national integration through educational programs; third, consolidation of democracy through education; fourth, development of social, moral and spiritual values; and five, modernization of society. Some of the widely recognized aims of education can be discussed. A. Knowledge aim. Knowledge lays the foundation of any time of education. Most of the educators in olden days held knowledge as the supreme aim of education. Second one, vocational aim. Education should prepare a child for a vocation or profession, enabling him to earn his livelihood. Vocational aims are essential for leading a worthy life. A liberal education without vocational education is useless. C. Harmonious development aim. John Heinrich Pestalozzi and Mahatma Gandhi have emphasized harmonious development as an intrinsic quality of any good system of education. Pestalozzi says, education is the harmonious development of the heart, head and hand. Gandhi says, education is the all-round drawing out of the best in the child and man, body, mind and spirit. D. Complete living aim. Herbert Spencer says, to prepare us for complete living is the function which education has to discharge, and the only mode of judging any educational courses is to judge in what degree it discharges such function. E. Religious aim. Faith in the fatherhood of God and brotherhood of man is the essence of all religion and all religious education. Next is the moral aim. Herbert Spencer says, the one and the whole problem of education may be summed up in a single concept, morality. Next is individual aim. Sir Percy Nunn says, the central aim of education is the autonomous development of the individual. Nothing good enters into the human world except in and through the free activities of individual men and women. Educational practice, therefore, must be shaped to accord with the truth. Next is social aim. Raymond says, the isolated individual is a figment of imagination. Bagley and Dewey are important advocates of the social aim of education. According to them, education should aim at making each individual socially efficient. Next, let us see the aims of education in totalitarian and democratic states. J.F. Brown says, education in a country and at all periods reflects on the ruling class. The aims of education are determined by political ideologies. Each individual must be trained to subordinate his interests to the interests of the state. Every child must undergo a rigorous code of discipline. Thinking along the lines approved by the authorities is stressed and very little independent thinking is allowed. Physical education and military training are given great importance. The student is made to realize the value and importance of obedience and conformity. The aims of education in a democratic setup are, it should develop a wide range of wholesome interest in each pupil by providing for learning through cooperative work. It should develop social outlook. It should develop the ability for constructive and independent thinking. It should develop the capacity of the pupil to discern truth from falsehood, fact from propaganda, and to reject the dangerous appeal of fanaticism and prejudice. It should provide for training dignity of labor. It should provide equal opportunities to all. It should develop love and respect for others. It should develop human relations, and it should cater to the individual difference of children and teach them accordingly. No attempt should be made towards uniformity. Finally, it encourages originality and inventiveness, and vocational choices are broad-based. Next is the aim of education in different schools of philosophies. The idealistic aims of education are exaltation of human personality, universal education, development of inventive and creative powers, acquisition and enrichment of culture, environment, self-realization, development of moral sense and self-realization. The naturalistic aims of education are self-expression, autonomous development of individuality, improvement of racial gains, and preparation of the struggle for existence. The pragmatic aims of education are social efficiency, change with changing times, more and more education and continuous growth and adaptation to environment. According to realism, the aims of education are complete living, understanding of human society, adjusting himself in the environment, and developing up to utmost perfection. Let us now move on to philosophy and curriculum. The need of philosophy of education felt very seriously in the area of curriculum planning. The philosophical approach to life is the guiding factor in the choice of students to be included in the curriculum. The curriculum is the sum total of the school's effort to influence learning, whether in the classroom or in the playground or out of school. K.G. Saidian says, the curriculum is primarily an aid in the process of adjusting this child to the environment in which he functions from day to day and in the environment in which he will have to organize his activities late. The concept of curriculum differs with different schools of philosophy. According to idealism, curriculum should stress on the nature of the child. It should emphasize the higher values, provide humanities a place of prominence. Ethics, religion, and art also must find an important place. Idealism gives importance to physical education, hygiene, philosophy, physical skills, gymnastics, and athletics. Naturalistic curriculum is based on the nature of the child, his interests. It lays stress on subjects that are helpful in self-preservation. It stresses basic sciences and it emphasizes physical and health education. Pragmatism stresses experience curriculum. Pragmatism regards utility as the prime mover in the determination of curriculum. Pragmatism assigns due place to the interest of the child and it provides for problem-solving activities. Pragmatism emphasizes subjects and studies like physical training, hygiene, social studies, mathematics, and science. The realist gives a high priority to subjects like physical sciences and mathematics. Modern languages may find a place in the curriculum because they enable one to read, write, and conduct all types of social intercourse, but literature as such will find no prominent place because the realist believes that it is out of touch with the real line of human advance. Now let us discuss philosophy and methodology of teaching. Methodology of teaching establishes a contact of the teacher, the taught, and the subject. It raises many problems. All such questions and problems that arise in the classroom techniques are satisfactorily tackled by philosophy. The idealistic method of teaching are learning through reading, learning through lecturing, learning through memorization and discussion, learning through imitation and Socratic method. Naturalism believes in learning by doing, through experience, through observation, and through heuristic method. Pragmatic method of teaching is getting wide acceptance across the world nowadays. These are project method, learning by doing, learning through creative activities, learning through purposeful activities, and learning through experiences. The socialist philosophy, Sarvodaya, is a culmination of Indian and idealistic thought. Its foundation have deep roots in the Indian soil, but it is different from Indian philosophies. Our philosophies were individualistic. Sarvodaya, basis of which is in the socio-economic conditions of the present-day world, is aimed at the good of all and presents a synthesis of all good points in different Indian and Western philosophies of life. Correlation of studies is the main principle of Sarvodaya method. It develops an integrated personality. The philosophical method is not absolutely different from scientific method. Philosophical problems have much in common with the scientific problems. The philosopher utilizes the same method of induction and deduction as used by scientists. The principles of different sciences are arrived at by means of inductive process. The philosopher utilizes concepts and propounds new theories. Example, materialism, idealism, and so forth. And then he or she tries to explain his or her experiences satisfactorily on the basis of these theories. Deduction is the process to arrive at certain particular propositions from a general proposition. Dialectical method is the natural method of philosophical thinking. This is a commonplace experience that when we think over a problem, we arrive at certain positive facts. That is, thesis. Now, after some time, we came to know some facts which are contradictory to thesis. That is, antithesis. This thesis and antithesis cannot live together for long. Hence, they are synthesized into a synthesis. This synthesis arrived through antithesis is more comprehensive than the original thesis. Thus, knowledge grows in a dialectical process through thesis to antithesis and then to synthesis. This method was developed by Hegel. Analysis means the process of distinction between different elements evolved in a particular state of experience so that they might be more clear. Realistic philosophers have emphasized this procedure while absolutists have advanced arguments against it. Synthesis method involves connecting together the scattered elements in a particular experience which brings into light new patterns and facts. The idealist philosophers have laid emphasis on synthesis. Let's now move on to discuss the methods of philosophical analysis. The methods of philosophical analysis were ideally suited to a stance of clear-eyed skepticism in the face of educational nonsense, of reasoned, balanced objectivity in the face of highly contested educational disputes, and of providing a helpful elucidative service that colleagues in education could find amenable to their concerns. Without neglecting the philosophical arguments that were posed in favor of analytic method, to which we will turn in a moment, there can be little doubt that these stances also suited the professional self-interest of a discipline seeking academic credibility as philosophically rigorous, in part through stronger affiliations with professional associations in philosophy. They also reinforced a position of non-partisanship in the constantly shifting arena of competing educational fads and trends. Analytic philosophy of education. This made substantial contributions in elucidating such concepts as authority, indoctrination, and even the terms teaching and education themselves. This method specialized in offering fine-grained distinctions and typologies, diagnosing hidden equivocations or blurring in the ordinary concepts found within the educational slogans or cliches, and criticizing faulty logic or misleading uses of statistics or other evidence. In many cases, educators found such analysis statutory and helpful. This was a philosophy in the service of plain speaking and no nonsense. This analytic movement within the philosophy of education followed developments within Anglo-American philosophy, notably the movement of logical positivism and various forms of linguistic philosophy. But the arguments raised in favor of analytic methods had the widespread appeal that they did within philosophy of education, in large part because of their congruence with other imperatives within the field as an increasingly professionalized discipline. There is a certain ambivalence that has often accompanied philosophy of education, on the one hand seeking credibility in relation to the traditions of philosophy, on the other hand seeking legitimacy within the often utilitarian climate of schools of education. This tension tends to pull philosophy of education in competing, incompatible directions and helps to account for what she calls the relentless need to explain and justify the discipline. Analytic method seemed to hold promise as the indisputably philosophical core that would controversially link the discourses of philosophy of education with mainstream philosophy. At the same time, its appeal to clarity and logic meant that philosophers of education wouldn't have to endure the accusations of abstraction, obscurantism and irrelevance they often heard within schools of education. The rise of analytic method clearly severed the chains joining philosophy of education. The analytic period established the independence of philosophy of education from progressivism. The analytic movement in philosophy of education took a particular shape in opposition to the movement that had preceded. One of the central tenets of the analytic school was that there were no direct implications of substantive philosophical positions for education, that a person may believe in realism, for instance, but still favor any of a variety of educational aims and practices. The attempt to provide encapsulated summaries of complex, difficult philosophical positions and then to read off from them neat implications for practice was regarded as being philosophically casual and as overpromising what philosophy could provide to education. Next, let us move on to the perspectives in philosophy of education. The philosophical work in education from critical theory or neo-Marxist, feminist and modern perspectives beginning during this period and expanding to the present day brought not only a shift in philosophical perspectives and methods but a more explicitly political commitment. The issues of class, gender, race and other dimensions of disadvantage and exclusion became explicit topics of investigation and focal points of advocacy. These issues were raised reflexively as points of critique against the field of philosophy of education itself. Such manifestations have a dual relation to the scope and content of a field, representing the work with which people are actually engaged, yet also reflecting back to the field what literatures, topics and perspectives are of current interest or importance. To the extent that scholars are influenced by what they read, such shifting trends play an active part in encouraging and giving legitimacy to new styles of work. The circular process by which a field becomes what it is thought to be in the minds of its members is exemplified practically in these activities. For philosophy of education in the post-analytic period, the contents are increasingly eclectic, interdisciplinary and iconoclastic toward traditional conceptions of the field. That this partly was an indication of a changing state of affairs and partly a cause of it was quite apparent to those involved in making such selections. Something else momentous happening to philosophy of education during this period is represented by two related sets of changes. The first is concerned with the demographics of the field, especially during the 1970s and into the 1980s, as more and more women entered what had been virtually all male organizations, or among those women who were already participants shifted their interests away from analytic philosophy or other traditional topics toward women's status within education. The second was the rise of feminism as a perspective on philosophical and professional issues within philosophy of education. Feminists pointed out that the questions of who was part of certain philosophical debates and what philosophical language those debates privileged were interdependent issues. They argued that the forms of philosophical argumentation in which rigorous aggressive debate was assumed to be the best way of testing new propositions had the effect of narrowing the range of perspectives available for discussion and actively intimidating or silencing those who did not debate their points in that manner. They argued that the methods of analytic philosophy, such as the tendency to isolate conceptual issues from actual contexts, gave artificiality to philosophical discussions, notably in the cases of ethics where they believed that interpersonal factors needed to be the topics of philosophical consideration from the very start. In these and other ways, they argued the interdependence of issues of content and issues of representation. The increased eclecticism of philosophical sources seen as relevant to philosophy of education and the increased awareness of the interdependence of issues of content and of representation are fundamentally transforming the field today. In the last decade of the 20th century, philosophy of education scarcely resembled a discipline with a distinct purpose and a clearly established agenda. It is more accurately characterized as a field of study defined by the variety of its research and interpretive projects. Let us now summarize the session. Philosophy of education is an important branch of applied philosophy. Of the three divisions of philosophy, metaphysics, epistemology and axiology, philosophy of education falls in the third. It is therefore mainly concerned with educational values. As a branch of philosophy, it utilizes philosophical methods for the solution of philosophical problems with a philosophical attitude to arrive at philosophical conclusions. In this comprehensive process, it includes facts concerning education and values. The horizon of education is gradually expanding the modern movement in education. It is concerned with the child and its development in relation to his life and environment. Some amount of idealism underlies the philosophy of new education. Today, education has become experimental as a science and laboratory of human life. Principles underlying all the educational behavior are derived from philosophy of education. Whenever philosophy has been taken seriously, it has always been assumed that it signified achieving a wisdom that would influence the conduct of life. Now, you can try to answer few questions. First one, how philosophy determines the aims of education? How and why curriculum changes one philosophy to another philosophy? Enlist the idealistic aims of education. Describe the pragmatic methodology of education. Why is the study of philosophy important to educators? Describe the emerging trends of philosophy of education. Now, you may go through few reference books. Philosophy of Education by S.S. Chandra and R. Sharma, Atlantic Publishers, New Delhi. Foundations of Education by S.P. Chobe and A. Chobe, Vikas Publishing House, New Delhi. An Introduction to the Philosophy of Education by D.J.O. Corner, Routledge Publication, London. Encyclopedia of Philosophy of Education by Paul Monroe, Cosmo Publication, New Delhi. The Philosophical Base of Education by Robert R. Rusk, University of London Press. Textbook of Educational Philosophy by R. Sharma, Kanishka Publishers, New Delhi. Thank you for watching today's program. We shall meet again with another topic. Goodbye.